I have been an avid follower of Glitch in the Matrix stories for years. However, it wasn't until this year that I experienced any firsthand. The first was strange, and the second I simply cannot fathom. Several months ago, I was sitting on my couch watching Netflix. The living room was set up with the couch against the wall, with my boyfriend's recliner when seated to the left of that. For perspective, I must tell you that I am right-handed. So here I am, watching TV and browsing my Facebook feed, and I saw a meme which I clicked on to expand. When I'm finished looking at it, I set my phone down beside me on the couch to my right. I even remember the specific angle in which I placed it, screen down with the top of the phone facing diagonally away from me. I proceeded to continue watching TV for some time, maybe 15 minutes. I didn't stand up or even adjust my position, but when I reached for my phone, without looking, I didn't feel it. So I look again and it isn't there. Confused, I search a wider radius on the couch and still do not find it. It isn't on the coffee table, and I'm not sitting on it. Before I stand up to search, I look to my left, and there it is, sitting on my boyfriend's recliner, in the back left corner of the seat. It's in the exact same angle as I placed it, but just not in the same spot. In order for the phone to have gotten there, I would have had to have stood up and placed it there. Or, at the very least, get on my knees and, with the phone in my left hand, reach my entire body across the armrest of both the couch and the chair to place it there. I didn't move from my spot, and certainly would have had no reason to stretch that far to put my phone in an inconvenient place. When I picked my phone up, it was on the same meme I had been looking at before I set it beside me. It's as if I set my phone beside me and it went through a portal into the chair. The second event happened while I was at work. Now, I work in a small bakery. We have a shed outside for storage since we offer a lot of items and there's limited space inside. We have a rolling 3-tiered metal cart to move items in and out to avoid multiple trips. On this particular day, I was prepping a wholesale order to go to a local grocery store. Most of our items are portioned straight from the pan into their packaging, and bars, brownies, / cinnamon rolls are packaged in plastic clamshell containers. So before I took the cart outside to load it up, I grabbed the sleeve of 8-ounce clamshells to put back in storage, certain that I would not need them that day. I make my way to the shed, store the clamshells, and load up the cart. I lock the shed and start rolling the cart towards the front door. The ground is super uneven, and you have to be careful not to jar the cart very much or risk all the items falling off. Well, I wasn't very careful and 2 items fell off onto the ground. First, a peanut butter brownie to the left, closely followed by a gluten-free cinnamon roll to the right. Annoyed at myself, I pick them up. Since I have dropped items before, I make sure to check the integrity of the packaging because they tend to crack. I'm glad I do, because I immediately notice a crack in the brownie clamshell. To confirm it is broken, I test it with my thumb. It's definitely cracked, as I'm able to stick my thumb into the package on the front left corner. Not wanting to turn around, I make a note to come back for the clamshells I had taken outside, in order to repackage it. I set the brownie back on the cart and make my way inside. When I reach the table where I lay the wholesale orders out, I start with the peanut butter brownie so I can set the broken one aside, but I can't seem to find it. None of the clamshells are broken. I think, okay, maybe I was mistaken and it wasn't the brownie. I proceed to check every clamshell. First, the cinnamon rolls, since that was the other fallen item, followed by cream cheese brownies, oat bars. None of them are cracked. I check every item a second time, and this time, every corner of every clamshell, pressing them to show any hidden cracks or holes, and there were no cracks. I kid you not, I checked every one of those packages no less than 4 times. I had only brought in the amount that we needed for the order, and everything was accounted for. I tell my boss, and she proceeds to also check the corner of every package. Nope, they're all uncompromised, and none were missing. We're both super confused, and I go outside to make sure I didn't grab an extra one or maybe it had fallen off again. I find nothing. Also, after trying to figure this out with friends, one asked if maybe I had repackaged it and forgot that I had already done so. But that's impossible. First, I had already stored the packaging materials outside. Second, I began checking the packages as soon as I unloaded the cart, meaning there's no way I could have repackaged it before unloading. It has honestly been weeks, and I still have no answers. So I don't really know how to explain this, or even if it fits on this sub, or even actually what happened if I'm being honest, but regardless, I will try to relay the story. I was driving to work this morning, and I'm coming up a side street that connects to a very busy road in my area. It's the main road that stretches through like 20 towns. I get to the red light at this main road, and I sit there for about 15 seconds before seeing a car pull up behind me. As the car comes to a complete stop behind me, my eyes drift from the rearview mirror to the stoplight in front of me. It was red still. I then looked down at my radio clock and it says 7:36. And this is gonna sound strange, but for a period of time that seemed to stretch on for infinity. I kind of felt like this intense pressure all around me. Like I was zoned out and I couldn't clear my head or move my body because I was obsessed with the numbers I was seeing. Like I was in a trance or something. And it wasn't silence around me, but at the same time, like a very loud, pressing silence. I couldn't move, but I also wasn't trying to move. Almost like I was paralyzed with fear. I know I was frozen, but couldn't really process it or try to move. I don't know. I really can't explain it. Even now, it's just so confusing to me. After who knows how long of being stuck in this trance, suddenly everything snaps back to normal, instantly. The very first thing I register is that the person behind me is laying on their horn. I look up and see the light is green. I begin to drive forward, feeling completely 100% normal again. And once I get into the middle of the intersection, I sense this large presence to the left of me. I turn my head to look out my driver's side window just in time to see a huge truck coming right at me. It hits me and I could feel my body break. I felt and heard so many of my bones get absolutely crushed. Suddenly I am upside down in my car, in so much pain that I can hardly breathe, covered in glass, and I can hear someone screaming. The last thing I remember before I passed out about 10 seconds later was seeing cop lights and distinctly thinking to myself, wow, how did they get here so fast? The next thing I remember, I open my eyes and I'm sitting at my car at the red light. The intense pain I felt a moment ago was fading fast, but it's still there. Almost like a ghost version of itself, if that makes sense. I'm intensely confused at this point, and I start looking around in a panicked way, and my eyes trail to the clock again. It says 7:36, and I'm just beyond confused. I know it wasn't a daydream, it was so goddamn real. I'm frozen in place staring at the clock, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. After about 5 to 10 seconds, I hear the person behind me start to beep at me, but I'm shaking and about to cry and so overwhelmed with leftover fear that I can't even react to it. They start to lay on their horn and I still can't move because I'm just so confused and frightened. Now at this point, I was starting to calm myself down and trying to rationalize what happened. I was beginning to convince myself that it had to have just been a daydream. It was early enough and I was tired enough that I even started to think maybe I just nodded off at the red light and dreamed the crash. What the hell else could have happened, right? If it weren't for what happened next, I probably would have been able to go the rest of my life believing I had fallen asleep and dreamt it. The moment that clock turned to 7:37, like the very second the numbers changed, a huge truck comes barreling through the light, definitely speeding. They ran their red light and crossed right in front of my car. A few seconds later, a cop who must have just been driving behind the truck in the first place runs the red light as well, turning on his lights in the process and beginning to pursue the speeding truck. They both drove out of my view within a few seconds. I was so shaken that I just pulled my car to the side of the road right where I was and sat there in silence for I don't know how long. Like, what normal explanation could I possibly come up with for this? Really, there isn't one. I hadn't seen the truck or the cop car before they ran the light in front of me. So how did the dream crash that I had include those very specific and very real details? The entire area I live in is covered in trees, so it's not like I can see very far down the road in either direction. I know for a fact I did not see the truck or the cop car before I experienced the crash. I'm still so shaken. How do I rationalize this experience to myself? I feel disillusioned by something, but I don't even know what. I feel like I'm going crazy. I needed to share this with people who won't automatically dismiss this as hallucination or dreaming. I've known of this phenomenon for a while. This Fatum project and the whole concept of quantum immortality nabbed my attention, and it's been genuinely fun to think about. Like many of you, it's caused me to look into my life and see if there was anything that stuck out of the ordinary. I remember everything like it was yesterday, despite it happening close to a decade ago. I have scars that have stuck with me since, and I've only begun to really question everything about my accident. I went home with a friend of mine in middle school named Brandon. He was a buddy of mine that I went to school with, but our schools had our grades separated between two colors, gold and blue. I was gold team, and he was blue. All of our classes took place in a different part of the school, and we had different sets of teachers, meaning we never really ran into each other, except for break and our weekends playing rec football together. I go home with him on a Friday, so I can go to practice with him, and so we can shoot the breeze during the weekends. His family had a few ATVs. They all lived close together, and almost every family member had one. We decided on Saturday that, after practice, we would ride them around for a bit. The first hour or so was me riding with him. I was slightly terrified with his speed, seeing as how it was one of the first times I was on one of them. Back roads, the highway, any road we could find, we burnt rubber on. I was terrified, but I ended up getting into it, despite not being the one to drive and having to hold on to him to avoid flying off the back. He gets tired of it. I'm confused why, but it is a normal thing for him, and it's something new for me. He knew I wasn't as ready to stop just yet, and said that I could ride his cousins. He knew I wasn't experienced as much as him, and he really didn't want me to mess his up. He told me what property his family owned, how to get back to the house, what roads to avoid, everything I would need to know, except one thing. His cousin's brakes didn't work. I don't know if he forgot about it or just forgot to tell me, but I sped off without any worries in the world. Everything starts out fine. The nervousness I felt was slowly dying off as I started to gain confidence. I got too cocky, and I decided I could start making turns at faster speed. I had to be going at least 40 to 50 miles per hour. I'm on one of the routes that he sped by, and a turn starts to come up. It curved like it was going into a circle. My speed left me unable to properly turn, and I could see the road fly right by me. I clutch the brakes in a panic, and look right up in time to see that I've beelined a course right into a tree. I had enough time to know what was about to happen, and I blacked out right on impact. I woke up in the middle of the road. The ATV was only a few inches from me, and my right arm was completely messed up. After focusing on my arm and clutching it to my chest, I looked to see how far away I was from the tree. I had to have been a decent 15 to 20 feet away. I cry out for Brandon, and within minutes he's there on his. He gets one look at me and the ATV and he is freaking out, saying that he had just gotten back to the house and he had left me only a few minutes ago. he's just as worried about me as he is about getting his ass handed to him by his cousin. So I go to the hospital, get my arm filled with pins and a cast for months. I still have the functionality, but I can't do the Spider-Man thing like I can with my left. What gets me though, and I mean really made me wonder, is how the hell did I end up smack in the middle of the road when I remember whizzing past it? I didn't have a helmet or any pads on me, except for my football pads that I left on after practice. It was like I hit the tree, and instead of that momentum pushing me forward further into the tree line, it threw me and the ATV backwards. Now, I'm no physicist, but something about that one fact does not add up. I should have woken up surrounded by pine trees. So, as I see it, there were two options. One, I hit the tree head-on, died, and somehow respawned. Or two, I hit the tree at the speed I was going and won the lottery. Okay, so I've had this account for a while, but I'm not a huge Redditor. I was encouraged to post this, and after losing 4 hours to perusing the tales of others, I've worked up the confidence. I believe this does belong here, but I may be wrong. It's my first post, I do believe, so do go easy on me, please. Several years ago, around 8 or so years ago, I was fishing in a boat with my ex. It was a quiet night and things were very still. This was during a 4-year span of sobriety, so we can rule drugs or alcohol out immediately. Anyways, it's early in the morning. I didn't have a cell phone then, and in the chaos I forgot to ask him, but if I had to guess, I would say around 3 in the morning or so. The air around us suddenly chilled, and I got goosebumps on my arm. We hear this wicked screech, like how I would imagine a pterodactyl would sound flapping its wings. Out of nowhere, this thing, I have no idea how to describe it. It had wings and looked very prehistoric, but wasn't really a bird. My ex saw it before I did, and when he stopped talking, I noted his silence and followed his gaze, and I found it. It was well over 10 feet tall. I'm not a small girl by any means. I easily weigh enough for 2 people, but I had the sense it would be able to carry me off effortlessly. I couldn't even scream. It was a crippling fear that I had knowledge of this thing I shouldn't. Like, I knew it wanted to attack me because I wasn't alone, but had absolutely no reason to feel that way. We packed up and left. Somehow on the 2-hour drive to my house, I checked the clock and it was then 10 in the morning. Now, I don't remember that exact time we saw that creature, but it was absolutely pitch black. That time of year in the Midwest, the sun rises around 6 a.m. So, even if it was 5 a.m. or something, it wouldn't be 10 a.m. after the better part of a 2-hour drive. I mentioned this to my ex, and he agreed it was weird. I'm hyper-aware at this point, and I begin noticing cars pulling off the road. They're looking at the sky, so I look too, and what I can only describe as an almost cliché-looking UFO was overhead keeping pace with the car. I say this because a static object would have gotten smaller, but for at least 15 miles this thing kept pace with us, stopping when we did at intersections, and then resuming. I'm submitting this here because I don't feel a possible Thunderbird or dinosaur sighting belongs in a paranormal subreddit. Likewise, a UFO story doesn't belong there either. These two events, coupled with missing time, is what led me to believe I should post it here. A fellow Redditor wrote a glitch story to do with the clouds, and it reminded me that I too had a strange experience. So one night, my friend and I were working in his shop, finishing up a job to be installed the following day. His shop sits catty-corner behind his house, about 300 feet, and then his property runs another 500 feet or so, to a tree line that is probably 300 feet wide. Also with the tree lines running the length of the property. It was a cold, crisp Michigan night, with a bright moon and very sparse clouds. It must have been between midnight and 1 a.m. when I stepped out to pee and get some air. About halfway through, I glanced up and the oddness of what I was looking at hit me instantly. It was January, and the trees were deciduous and completely bare, but the strange part was that the only clouds were running half the length of the eastern tree line, and it's as if they were mimicking where the tops of the trees met the sky. I don't mean like they were loosely following the line, but every nook and cranny to a T. They were synchronistic, as if the clouds were an extension of the trees. I was baffled, amazed, and perplexed by this. I immediately thought, I need to go get my friend to show this to him. I hurried back in and got his attention, and in roughly 20 seconds he was outside and I was telling him, like, hey, check out the clouds, blah blah blah. However, in that short time, they were still mimicking the tree line but had started to separate from it. So me, feeling like a weirdo, started to explain how they looked when I first saw them. He was just kind of like, okay, and turned around to head back inside. No sooner than he did, he goes, whoa, and points now at the western tree/skyline and says, you mean like that? I turn around, and now on the other side of his property, the same phenomenon is happening. I mean, every intricacy of the branches and tops of the limbs, there was a cloud sitting right on top of it with no separation, and outside of these light gray clouds, almost white from the moonlight, there was nothing in the dark blue winter sky besides stars. You could see through the bare trees as well, and easily see the clouds were not running behind them, just along the tops. Anyway, we stared at it for maybe 30 seconds as they drifted off, but if that wasn't some kind of glitch, then I guess the brain really does create what you see, which is a whole nother can of worms. So this event happened on October 7th, 2019, at 5:46 p.m., and I'll briefly try to describe it. I was on my way to running some errands, riding in my car while on the phone with a friend. I remember the weather being super weird, cloudy but hot. I don't really know how to describe it, but it felt like the air had some sort of heaviness to it. While I was talking to her, she said a few sentences to which I replied in agreement. Suddenly, she starts saying the same exact sentence she had just said 30 seconds earlier, only in a different tone and pace. It really sounded like she was repeating herself and not like the actual voice glitched or repeated, which is what made it even creepier. So, at this point, everything became fuzzy and weird, almost as if I lost sense of time. In the meantime, I heard my message's ringtone going off a few times through the earpiece, but I decided to check them later on. So I go on and tell her I'm pretty sure that she already said to me all of those things, and the most unsettling thing is that her voice would stop whenever I tried to tell her, as if she was actually listening, but would then continue on as soon as I would go silent. Without saying anything regarding the fact that she was repeating herself over and over, it was like talking to someone who was purposely trying not to answer. It felt really odd, especially considering each sentence was slightly different than the previous one, but the meaning kept on being the same. But that's when I lost her completely. The line gets cut off and I go to check those messages that I had received earlier. Turns out they were actually from her. 2 of them were missed calls, and the last one said to call her back as soon as I could. I was still actively talking to her at the same time she was asking me to call her back. Definitely one of the most bizarre things that has ever happened to me. Hey there, friends. I hope you all enjoyed this lovely collection of Glitch in the Matrix stories. The one with the Thunderbird and UFO is definitely, in my opinion, one of the more interesting ones, mostly because I would have expected that to feel like a paranormal story, but according to the comments, and I'm going to read this one comment because it's interesting. They claimed that what happened during that experience was a portal opening from the lower astral dimension, and that's how both things came into our dimension. So, interesting theory. I just wanted to share that because that was a very strange story, and one you don't normally see on Glitch in the Matrix, but I can absolutely see why they shared it there. So, thank you to everyone who lets me use their stories. It is greatly appreciated, and I do hope everyone here did enjoy this collection. If you did enjoy this and would like content that's kind of like this or content that is so vastly different, it's like comparing erasers to tissue boxes, please do consider joining the Nevermore. To join the Nevermore, all you gotta do is hit that subscribe button, the bell icon next to it, and then you're part of this Nevermore. In addition to this, you can support the growth of the Nevermore by clicking on any of the links down in the description, including my Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, and my Patreon and Coffee, all optional, all greatly appreciated. All that said, friends, I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope your week is treating you well, and I hope to see you on the next video. But until then, much love and sleep well.